Good morning, everyone. We studied this week the portion, two portions combined, Tazria, impregnating, and Metzorah, someone who is afflicted with a disease. It's an unusual disease. It's a combination of two portions, as is done many times. We are studying the second talk of the Rebbe in selections from Likutei Sichot. It is a fascinating point the Rebbe is going to be making, and I'm sharing with you an abbreviated concept from the detailed appeared in the talk. In the category of tzara'at, I'm going to use the word leprosy, but it's not contagious and it does not connect to real leprosy as we know. In addition, the Torah is talking about three categories of leprosy. One that appears on the walls of a house. The second that appears on garments, wool or leather. And the third on the skin of a person. And the Torah talks about what the exact colors, the size, the changes, what will purify a person, how do they get purified, etc. We are dealing with one category right now, the human being, where a change of color appears on the skin or a discoloration and losing of hair appears in a place where hair grows. The colors of the skin will be different depending on the part of the body. The minimum has to be a small one like Isar. Isar is about the measurement of a dime. So to make it easy, if the discoloration is smaller than that, it does not count. Also, some of it will have to have some white hair, and also it has to be expanding. If it's shrinking even a little bit, it's not considered leprosy.
If it expands, right? You see day after day.
You don't see every day, you see every week. When the first time he goes to the Kohen, let's say he has on his arm or on his back, stomach, whatever, the Kohen looks at it and it will segregate them, exclude them out from the community for 7 days. 7 days later, he has to be seen again. Now we are looking. If it did not change, no change, then he's trying one more week to test, to see what happens. If it shrunk, he brings him back to the community. If it expanded, now he's a chalut. Chalut means a certain man who is afflicted with it, and now he has to be staying away until it shrinks, until he does teshuva, etc.
On occasion he comes back, he has to have.
And then in the first case, if it shrunk after the first week, or it stayed the same, and the third week it stayed the same, he goes back. I don't think he needs to purify himself. Okay? When it comes to the law of leprosy, the Torah begins with the words in Hebrew the following. Adam is man, ki yeh be'or besaro. If he will have a discoloration on the skin of his flesh. The human being, the word human can be termed in Hebrew in 4 different ways. Adam, Ish, Gever, Enosh. If you'll find in the Torah, Ma Enosh ki tizkerenu, we say it in Yom Kippur. Gever, we say it in the morning, we thank God. Gever is from the word Gibor, a strong man. Ish is a human, is a person. The highest level of a human being, when you want to describe someone of a great stature, you use the word Adam. Ask the Rebbe. Leprosy, discoloration, comes for a very great misbehaving. We know it comes from talking lashon hara, gossiping, slander. It's considered, as Rambam writes, it's worse than the 3 cardinal sins combined. It's worse than murder, it's worse than idol worshipping, and it's worse than adultery. Lashon hara. In other words, all 3 combined is not as bad as Lashon Hara. And yet, someone who is afflicted with this, we call him Adam. Oh, he's a great man. How is it possible? The Alter Rebbe explains, he clarifies that the explanation is evident from the paradox itself, specifically because one is on a lofty level, an Adam, one on a truly elevated rung, possessing consummate perfection, he is susceptible to affliction with tzara'at blemish. The Alter Rebbe says, in order for someone to be notified by God that his speech is inappropriate, he has to be a very high stature. He needs to be on a high level. He needs to be perfect in everything else. And then God says to him, there is a little bit that needs to be corrected. That's why the Torah begins Adam. Not every person is going to be receiving this kind of a sign. The Al-Shich said that the Tzarat, Rabbi Moshe Al-Shich says, Tzarat appears only at the time when people walked before God, serving God in all their ways, and then, unfortunately, in their speech, they weren't careful. That's when God will correct them by bringing Tzarat. But an ordinary person like in our day and age, you won't find it. You know why? Because we are so sunk in misbehaving, we are so covered with so much negativity. There is a rule in the Torah, min bemino eino chotzetz. When you bring something of the same kind, connecting to something else, if they are of the same type, it will not create any separation. In other words, Lashon Hara will cause someone tzara'at when that's the only thing that needs to be corrected. It's something, one thing. But if that's the norm, if that's the life of a person where they are not that great, then Lashon Hara will not have any impact on the human. And therefore, the Torah begins with the word Adam. Adam, only a person of a high stature, is the one who can be afflicted with tzara'at. So the Rebbe says we need to understand, how is it possible for a person who is such a high situation to speak Lashon Hara? Lashon Hara is something that of basic decency. You're not going to be dealing, we're not speaking of someone who is sitting in the street chasing women, so to say, and looking for fun. We're talking about someone who is of a high caliber. He studies Torah, he teaches Torah, he conducts a good house, and to say that he's going to be afflicted with Lashon Hara, something does not make sense.
We also learn that the higher the person is, whatever slightest sin he does, he gets punished more so than a person who's
So Harry says that someone who is a holy stature will be, God is much more strict, stringent with. That's correct. But you cannot apply it to Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is a very, very base or the inappropriate conduct. You don't accept that a righteous man should follow it, should disobey God. The Rebbe says, let's understand that by learning Rambam, Maimonides, when it is talking about Lashon Hara. Rambam begins the following. He says, Lashon Hara can kill three people. The one who speaks, the one you're speaking about, and the one who hears. All three will be cut off from God. In other words, it's worse than all three sins combined. But then Rambam goes on with a whole discussion. Rambam said, learn from Miriam. Miriam spoke Lashon Hara. One of the six remembrance that we have to remember every day is remember what God had done to Miriam. Baderech betzeitchem mimitzrayim. On the road outside of Egypt, she spoke. What happened? She spoke about Moshe, and God punished her for 7 days. She had to go out of the community. So the Rambam goes on to say, this is what happened to a person who is sitting like a jokester, wasting his life, sitting, looking to socialize and make people laugh. they start with divrei tzchok. They start making jokes, making fun, let's everybody be happy, everybody see how great I am. And they go on to start speaking against the rabbi, against the prophets, against God himself. Says the Rambam, the Lashon Hara will cause someone to deny God and become an atheist. That's Rambam. Ask the Rabbi, I don't understand. Where did the Rambam get it from? Rambam is talking about Jewish law. Jewish law, we talk about Tzarat, is caused by Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is, God speaks very much clearly against that. Rambam wants us to learn from Miriam, makes sense. But to come and say that someone who speaks Lashon Hara will be speaking against the scholars, against prophets, and against God, to deny God, well, there is a misconnection here. How did he make that bridge? In addition, said the Rebbe, after all, we're talking about holy people, Adam, right? A very holy man like Miriam. Not everybody can be afflicted with Tzarat. Yet, Rambam writes that the guy is going to deny God. How do you jump from a scholar? If you tell me someone never studied Hebrew, did not follow, wasn't raised with tradition, didn't know how bad the Lashon Hara, you can say to him, please be very careful because it would lead you to deny the scholars, deny prophets, and deny God. But you're talking about people who study Torah and know God and have the tradition, were raised that way, maybe even teaching others, and yet Rambam writes, you know what? That's the path they are choosing. If they choose Lashon Hara, it's a rabbit hole where it's going to get worse and worse, and Rambam enumerates until they deny God. Denying God is not just to make it fun, too easy to read. Rambam means that a person who speaks Lashon Hara will end up becoming an atheist, who would say there is no God, God forbid. Where did Rambam take it from? In addition, Rambam, in the law of Ilchot Deot, of the human character, Rambam speak again against Lashon Hara, and he says that someone who speaks Lashon Hara is considered like denying God. Because when you speak bad about somebody, you realize that you speak against God's image. Another human being has God's image. It's as if akin to denying God. Here, Rambam says, in the law of Lashon Hara, he says that it will lead, at first he said it will kill 3 people. And it's tantamount to all 3. Then he goes on to say it will lead someone to deny God. Says the Rebbe, I don't understand. Let him copy from what he wrote about the law of the character of a human being, saying that it is going to be similar to denying God. But here he's using a whole different language. Here is the Rebbe's explanation. I'm giving you a very, very concentrated details. The Rebbe says that according to Rambam, there are 2 types of Lashon Hara. There is the straightforward Lashon Hara when someone don't like something about somebody, someone don't care about how people feel about when they're spoken about, and a person goes and shares information. He's not lying, he tells the truth. But by sharing the truth, by sharing Lashon Hara, gossiping, what he does is he causes direct pain and suffering to another person. That is something that's a big, big no-no, and that's the category most texts are talking about. Lashon Hara gossip is inhumane. You know why? It makes you feel good, but you're hurting someone. Don't do it. But there is another type of Lashon Hara, and that's when Rambam wants to learn from Miriam. And let me explain it. Says the Rebbe, someone who do not want to speak Lashon Hara. He knows that Lashon Hara is unacceptable, it's wrong, shouldn't be done. I don't want anyone speaking Lashon Hara about me. Why should I be speaking about somebody else? But he start with idle talk. That's what the Rabbi is speaking. He has extra time. There is no Facebook and there is no Instagram because he's not interested. So or maybe he does it on Instagram. What does he do? He calls somebody, he says, let's go for coffee. Let's have a little fun. And they are starting to chit-chatting and talking. The talk does not stop. it will continue because they're having fun, they're drinking, they're eating, everybody's sharing the other person's words of wisdom. And now from that, says Rambam, it will lead to what? Ignoring the scholars. And from then, ignoring the prophets. What the prophet said, oh, it's not applicable today, it's not for us, it applies only in Israel, etc. And that will lead also to denying God. In other words, it's not just that it's akin to denying God, it's equal to the three cardinal sins. That's the one category, but there is another category. Even Adam, a holy man who is careful about what he eats, who is careful about how he prays, who is careful about buying the nicest lulav possible, and he's spending a lot of money on matzah, and he's inviting guests to his house. But chit-chatting will lead to the worst kind of belief, which is to deny God. Says the Rebbe, that's where we see from Miriam. There are some points that needs to be brought about Miriam. When Miriam spoke Lashon Hara, she did not intend to hurt Moshe, number one. Number two, it was not negative. She was just sharing about the fact because she was trying to help him. And thirdly, Moshe didn't mind. Moshe never needed to forgive her because he knows she gave up her life for him. She's the one who stood by to watch what will happen. She's the one that he was created by. Because of him, they remarried. Her father and mother remarried. In other words, she's the reason he's around. In addition, she's his sister who loved him and very proud of him. And it's Moshe. There is nobody closer to God. She did not intend to hurt anyone's feelings. She did not intend to put someone in a negative light. She intended to assist. And as I said, Moshe himself is not ever offended by that. Yet God says, this is Lashon Hara. You know why? A person, and this is to me the punchline, a person might think that speaking is external. It's something that you said and it's gone. Nobody's holding it. If I punch someone in the face, you'll have a scratch. If I took some money from you, you have lost money. But if I said something, who cares? Comes the Torah and tells us, that's why the tzaraat appears on the skin. You know why the skin? It's external. However, the ramification to correct it, there is a process that's worse than any other impurity. Even touching a dead corpse, that the purification needs the red heifer, the person can live in the community, can share a life with his wife and children, can be socializing. You know what a Metzorah is? A, has to leave even the Israelite camp, has to leave his house. B, says the Rebbe, that's unique. He's not allowed to be with others. They have to be totally separated. In other words, he has to be left alone. No one else, no other Metzorah is allowed to be. And if someone is going to ask in the Haftarah, we talked about Arba'a Metzoraim. There were 4 people. There is a lot of questions there in that story. One of them, how is it possible all 4 were together? They were supposed to be separately. Anyway, but back to our discussion. So that's why God will afflict to send a sign that it seems to be external, but it affects the very soul, the essence of a person, and that's why it has to be removed from the community, has to be removed from a fellow human being. Adam Metzorah is not allowed to be in the same place with this person. That's why Rambam, after saying that Lashon Hara can kill 3, and Lashon Hara is similar or greater than all 3 cardinal sins, Lashon Hara, Rambam goes on in a whole different discussion and says, you know what? Some people who have started idle talk and they speak Lashon Hara, it will lead them one step after the other. At first to speak against the scholars, then against the prophet, then they will deny God. In other words, it's not external, it's the expression of the essence of the soul, and therefore it can lead a person to the worst kind of conduct. Why is it important? Because by the way, says Rebbe, that's why the only one who can purify the person is a Kohen. Even if the Kohen does not know from a hut, he doesn't know the different colors, they bring someone who is knowledgeable, someone who is a professional, someone who's trained, and he tell the Kohen, say tahor, say tameh, say it's pure, say it's not pure. Only the Kohen, because the Kohen is isha chesed. Kindness is expressed through a Kohen. Only a Kohen who is very close to God, the closest to God from all other Jews, is the one who is able to bring him up back once the time has come after he did teshuvah. To me, the power of speech is extremely, extremely important. Not only the power of speech is the one that can lead someone to so many sins, as we see over here, it's akin to the three cardinal sins. Says the Rambam, it will lead someone to even the nine gun. I want to conclude the story I just heard, and I'm going to use it again on Shabbat, but I'm going to build a speech around it, so please don't say to me you heard it. I heard, if you don't agree to the conditions, I'm going to skip it, but I don't think you'd want to hear. It's a true story that during the Holocaust, every day, every hour, the BBC would be heard all over Europe. The BBC would start the hour news with the ringing of the Big Ben. The Big Ben would ring the hours. After doing it for a while, the Big Ben symbolizes freedom. We're still here. We're going to fight till the last breath of life. Churchill is going to win. That's the concept of the Big Ben ringing. After a while, they discovered that the German scientists will be able to extrapolate from the sound of the clock to know the winds, the weather, and the clouds. And it would aid them in planning attacks in the Blitz, those nights where they would send. They knew exactly what the weather, the conditions were, based on listening to the sounds and comparing from one hour to the other. So what did they do?
Recorded it.
They recorded it. So now they went and changed the sound of the Big Ben by playing a recorded sound of a Big Ben, not the actual. But when I heard it, it says, gosh, if there is any time when God says, when we said in the Mishnah, God say, please pay attention to what comes out of your mouth. Look how powerful the sound of a clock, of a big clock, that these people can tell whether there is rain, whether there is heavy clouds, just by the echo of that clock. How much should people be careful of the way they speak, the sound of their speech? I've been told many times, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I was told that I'm a trained professional to share information, but based on the sound, the way I say it's not just the words. And I believe in it because I heard it from many, many people. I have someone who would say to me, you speak very kindly, but the tone or the way it sounds is very harsh, and vice versa. We need to learn from here the positive. If someone walks by, someone is asking, or I approach someone and I do it with a sound of happiness and joy, it's a day and night. It really is a day and night. And one day people will be able to tell who you are, just like a DNA, by the sound you utter. And that's why the Torah is dedicating 2 portions to Lashon Hara. Many more lessons to be studied, but this lesson I think is very powerful. Thank you very much, and have a good Shabbos, everybody. Bye, Giselle.
When was